Welcome back, everybody. Steve from the Pinball Room, and yes, yet another whitewood. So yeah, I needed to go through and get another more final whitewood that I can use to have the game ready for the show. If you remember, the ball trough and the shooter lane, that auto launcher mech, they were not fitting in right how they needed to be, and so I redid the bottom and updated that file. It's available in my public files for you all to download if you want it. So I updated all that, and I mean I'm pretty much at the point from the last video, right, where we're done iterating on all the mechanical side of things. It is what it is. We got the targets we're going to have for the show. We might iterate on them later. We got that last flipper mech in for the diverter. We got all that in. I've got some final wiring things to still go through and do. A few more switches, well, several switches still to hook up and things like that. But the main thing I was coming back and kind of wanting to get figured out is for the stepper motor. And for the stepper motor, if you recall last video, I mentioned that there's this really nice aluminum bracket. I don't have it right here, but there's a nice aluminum bracket that comes with it, right? But between that and the mounting holes that are actually on the case itself, it ends up holding the stepper motor not flush with the playfield, with the underside of the playfield, but below it by about a ½ inch, which has lowered the steps that I had modeled and put all together down ½ inch, the height of the playfield also. And so that's kind of changing everything. So I wanted to go through and get that corrected. So I started to go through and just model my own little motor mount. I've left a lot of spaces and holes so the motor, if it's getting warm, it can like cool off and not have issues. And this guy fits in really nice and snug. Okay, so this goes in nice and is good, and it's got these little beveled edges to match up with the motor. But this just brings it exactly, the bottom of the motor exactly flush with the playfield, where before it was up by about a1/4 inch. And that's going to help, but it's not going to raise the step up all the way. So I'm printing off another piece right now that's about 6 millimeters shorter, which will lower the motor into the playfield 6 millimeters, which means I need to go through and route out a little recessed portion for this motor to go in that's about 6 millimeters deep. So I want to go through and get that all set up and done, and then start depopulating the old playfield and populating it all onto the new playfield. So yeah, so you can see we've added in a few more, keep adding more and more cuts into our Fusion file. So now I've got these cuts for all the little things I'm going to be popping out, and they come out pretty easily, which is nice the way these got cut by the CNC. So we're going to go through, remove all of those, file them down, and then this is the hole now for the subway. So it's a nice CNC'd hole versus the one I just drilled and screwed around. We've got more precise holes for the flipper bats. I've even gone through and put in these small little rectangle holes that are going to fit the wires for our optos. So as we go through and we're putting in the optos, we've got a place to slide those through the playfield. Okay, that fits both type of clips. Will go through there just fine. So we've got those in for all the primary opto areas we need to go. We got the stand up for the captive ball put in or cut out there. We've got a couple of holes for a couple of the primary posts that we know need to go around. Anyway, this is the new angled one for the stand up targets. That we definitely got to double check because that might be too aggressive of an angle. Anyway, not the final one, but this is going to be the one we're going to need to take with us to Tacoma for the show. So anyway, that's what we're going to go through and do. So we'll time lapse a little bit of stuff. We'll get this playfield cleaned up, the shapes cut out, and yeah, we're going to start messing around with this stepper motor and see what we can make happen there. All right, come along for the ride. Buckle up. We just used our router to go through and get like a recessed groove here. So yeah, so we cut out this piece. Pretty good little cut for kind of freehanding a little bit. And then let's just see, make sure our motor fits down inside it. Better too small than too big, right? We don't want it loose. But it's just a hair too tight, so we'll fix it. All right, there we go. Like a glove. All right, so we've got this piece cut out now, this depression here, and I went ahead and put the drop target back in, put these two stand-up targets back in. We've got our new printed piece that's a little bit shorter, so I want to go through and kind of confirm that everything fits in the right spot. One of the things I noticed is I didn't account for this bracket and for where I was going to end up screwing it into the wood, for where I had these holes for those optical wires. So this one's getting covered. So I'm going to need to scoot him over a little bit. But now I want to go through and see if this really fits with the motor and we get in the right spot. I want to get that with the brackets for the stairs all put back in together, double, triple check that all that's in the right position. If that's all looking good, then we'll go through and start bringing everything across the playfield onto this playfield and move on to some coding finally. But let's see how we can get this to work here. Yeah. So this piece fits around it. The motor just kind of slides inside like so, right? With the wires sticking up off the back. Okay, but then you can see the motor still sticks out below it. All right, and that's where it's going to be sinking down to the wood. Nice. Looking good. We don't always mess up the measurements, only most of the time. Okay. That's looking good, and it's holding the motor pretty snug. I did have to just kind of throw an impromptu screw hole in here since one of them was right through the other hole I had cut, but yeah, I like it. We're looking good. That's holding it nice and snug. And the teeth are right in the center where they need to be. Up and down here, they're looking good. All right, it's looking pretty good. You see that? That bottom step. Nice and flush with the playfield right now versus where it was before. So yeah, I'm very pleased with that. So these brackets up here that are all spiffy and holding the optos sensors. The one thing I failed to check, and somebody else pointed it out on the video in their comments. They're like, oh, how do you count for not just when the ball's blocking it, but when you rotate the stairs, the front of the stair, it rotates up and it blocks the opto sensor. I'm like, it's a very good catch. So I need to raise this by, the height of the opto, like it's just barely coming to the top of the opto is where that's at. So I need to raise that by just a little bit. So these are just a tiny bit taller. And then it will only get tripped by the ball coming by and not by the stairs rotating. Now I also need to double check that for the bottom of the stairs to see if the same issue. I might need to lift those optos off the playfield with like a little spacer. So I'm gonna test that here right now also. All right, so it's very close. As long as I don't have, it's not so much even the up and down, it's more the front and back. If I slide the opto just enough to the front, the ball still totally blocks it, but the stair comes up and moves just at an angle up and just behind the opto diagonally. so I think I'm going to be okay. Now, obviously, me moving the stairs by my hand is not exactly the same as having the stepper motor move it. And so we'll have to do some actual tests with the stepper motor powered and running through and see if the switch is being tripped by that. But these two, I'll just extend to make them just a little bit taller. And this guy, the ones down here, for now I'm just going to start in the right placement front to back that I think is going to work, and we'll test it from there. Okay, but I feel confident enough that we can go ahead and start deassembling the old Playfield number 4 and populating number 5. Actually, the next thing I'm going to double check, I want to go through and double check my ball trough and my auto launcher and make sure that all my new cuts are working out, as well as my calculations tell me that they should be working out. So we're going to do that next. All right, took a few washers, but we got it working. Yay! All right, that's looking good. That is looking good. Now we're ready to go through and repopulate this playfield. All right, so new day. New brackets, printed these out last night with a larger hole to be able to handle this, a larger connector here at the end. Working pretty good. The optos are a little bit looser now at the top. Like before they were super tight, now they're almost a little bit loose. And so, I don't know. Probably need to iterate on this design a little more for a final thing that looks nicer and has just a little bit better fit, but for now they're gonna work great, and they're 6 millimeters higher, or 8 millimeters higher. So should be plenty tall enough now to avoid the stairs. Before we put all that back in though, I went ahead and disassembled the rest of the stair mat here. We had it tested, we have this recessed, routed out nice. Everything's looking good there. But what I want to do now is I want to go through and I want to get a better looking upper playfield between all the holes and the misalignments and everything. I'm going to go through and cut out another piece of one of these. And before I get the playfield all populate it, I'm going to line it up and make sure that the post holes are matching exactly for the post holes here in the playfield, so everything is really well lined up. So I'm going to hurry and cut out one of those and get that going first. All right, I think that's pretty good. It's still, we're still using old scrap pieces and all that because we're nowhere near final, right? But we're getting closer. I will need to go through after the show, come back around and get this piece put inside Fusion 360 along with that, with the back panel, right? And have, that way I can have very precise cuts. Like I still went through, much as I measured and triple measured and double measured, I'm still, these angled cuts are still not exactly symmetrical, identical. One side is about 4 millimeters, I think, longer than the other, shallower anyway. So, but I do feel pretty confident that these are where they need to be and all lined up good. So cross our fingers that works well enough. We don't have to hollow out those holes and make it ugly again like last time. So I think we're gonna be okay, but we'll see. Anyway, proof's in the pudding. So now we gotta take everything off of that, put it on this one and put it all together. So yeah, time to start tearing apart the other playfield and see if we can remember how it all goes together. All right, it's been a long day. Literally all day. Been going out for like almost 10 hours now. But this is the new Playfield, and we're almost all the way there. We've got the shooter lane we talked about. I need a special 3D printed shooter lane that will do the curve and come out along this flipper, but then also have the, come up about halfway so the ball can come up and over. But then when it comes around from the orbit, it'll follow along in front. So we're printing out the first version of that right now. Fingers crossed, we'll see how it works. This space here is about 9 inches, which is just a ½ inch too long for my 3D printer bed will handle. It can only do about 8.3 inches. So I'm doing one that's about 8 inches long. And anyway, we're gonna see how it turns out. There might be a little bit of a gap here with this metal we'll have to play with. We'll see. We'll come back to that. But the thing I want to show you is the stairs. We've got the stairs back in. We've got the taller brackets that we showed earlier. We've got the opticals back installed here. Long story short, this step is now perfectly flush. We have this little gap the ball has to jump, but it does that no problem. And the bottom opticals, they're kind of on the side of the ball, but they're being very well blocked, so that's going to trip the switch just fine. And then every time the switch comes up, it is well outside of blocking those lights. We've got probably 3 millimeters of clearance, plenty of clearance. And as the ball comes up the top, it definitely is blocking the beam, but as it goes past and as the stairs continue by, we're staying good 2 or 3 millimeters below the beam, below those diodes. So yeah, should not have to worry about the stairs tripping any of these switches. Should be purely just the ball. So yeah, thanks for pointing that out and making me think through that. I hadn't considered that before, guys. Thank you. We've also got a new metal ball guide here for being able to get the ball to go back to the shooter lane. Different piece here because these are now at an angle coming down, fairly aggressively back down towards you, right back into the pops. That should make those kind of dangerous shots. But it also is opening up the alley to the out lane, which I think is good. Before, it was so closed off, it's like you were never going to drain out the right side. Anyway, so we'll see how that plays out. We've also got we saw earlier, right, that the trough and the auto launcher are working great. But I did notice, one, in this whitewood, I hadn't carved any recessed groove to be able to have the ball kind of track in. So I sanded down just a little bit over the switch, a little groove to help the ball rest in the right place on the switch. And I also noticed when I was doing that, my slot for the switch is still a little bit off. It needs to be down about another 4 millimeters. So I've adjusted that in my file, made a couple other adjustments in my files also. A couple of these holes that I had, these little recesses, to be able to put the wires through for the opticals. This one right here is right where the mounting bracket for the stepper motor is. I don't remember if I mentioned that earlier or not, so we're gonna have to move that one up a little bit. I've done that in my file. This one here, for these optos behind the switch, is going right through where I've got the edge of a bracket for flipper. So that's gonna need to come back down a little bit. I adjusted that. Anyway, making a few tweaks here and there still. I like to say this is my final whitewood, but not even close. There's still so many little tweaks and adjustments I'm seeing I need to make, and I'm sure we'll find even a few more. So yeah, but everything else is going good. Got things back in place. It's time to go back through and start wiring everything back up. Try to get this crazy mess of a harness down here back into position. As I was taking it off, I'm like, yeah, when I put it back on, I should change out that wire and replace that, make that better. I should change out this one and make it better. So I'm gonna go through and try to fix and improve a bit of the wiring along the way also. I noticed there's, I have a handful of switches I hadn't wired. I still need to go through and wire up. Plus I still need to add like my lane guide or my in-lane switches. Some different stand-ups still need to be wired in. I noticed one of my coils from my upper Playfield, actually I had not ran power to it somehow. I like misrouted a cable, and anyway, so some things to tweak. So while we're waiting for that shooter ramp to print on 3D printer, gonna continue on putting this back in and making some tweaks. All right, so yet another day. We got a 3D print waiting for us, but we've got all the wiring set back up. Going through and doing this, I changed position of one of these boards, and I'm just reminded how much fun wiring is, because we're basically going to get to do almost all this all over again, at least once. And that's because we don't have any inserts or any lighting in place right now, and that's going to kind of change quite a bit of how we really gather and group and run things. Not entirely, but at least to a certain extent it's going to. And I mean, I'm most proud of my ball trough and how that wiring turned out, but there's a bunch of other wiring, especially how I'm doing my opticals, and I still need to run. I need to get the terminal block, like for all the grounds, so those can go in together. There's still just several things that could be a lot better, a lot more organized than what they are right now. So anyway, we get to rerun a bunch of wires, so yay, more wires, but not today. We're gonna do what we can to try to make this work for the upcoming show as much as possible. Honestly, I've forgotten even exactly which all wires went where, so I'm gonna have to undo a bunch of zip ties. I was warned that would happen a lot. I knew it would happen a lot, but yeah, we're gonna have to undo a bunch of zip ties, route them, double check exactly which wires are going where to make sure they're synced up correctly for our config definitions, and then we'll kind of re-zip tie and get things nice and tidy. But yeah, we've got wiring, lots of fun. But let's move on from the wiring for a minute. The last thing I want to kind of show you for this video, now we've got the Playfield basically all set up on the new whitewood. Everything's good. The wiring is in their approximate locations. We'll tidy that up. Mostly done wiring. I want to show you the last thing though, what we 3D printed last night. This funky looking thing that I showed you earlier. All right, I'm sure most of you probably recognize what it was, but that was my attempt to give you a little bit of a tease for later in the video. So this is the 3D printed shooter lane ramp is what I'm calling it, right? And it's the part, this is just over 1/2 inch tall here, okay? So when the ball comes along here in the orbit, it will follow nicely. It's tall enough to guide the ball, but it's short enough that the ball can come up and kind of jump into the lane and go around the orbit, okay? So the ball can come out of the shooter lane straight up this groove. One thing that's important to know when you're making grooves like this for the ball, you don't want this groove to be exactly the size of the ball and have the ball like totally sitting there. Can we get light behind that? I want you to see there's light underneath there. You see that just barely? There's light inside that. You don't want this to be exactly the shape of the ball to where the whole ball is touching. You really want the ball just to be riding on the ridges here on each side. That's why when you look at it like a shooter lane on a used pinball machine, you'll see usually the edges of that curved groove is where there's the most like dirt and grime and wear, because that's where the ball will ride, okay? And that does the best job of kind of controlling the ball, reducing friction, and helping guide it. Anyway, so when you're making things like this, or when you're doing that cut here in your shooter lane for the ball, don't make it too big and deep to where the ball is like totally cradled inside. Make it just enough where the ball is just kind of sitting up on rails, just like our habit trails or train tracks or things like that. Anyways, so again, I wanted this to be just a little bit longer so it would connect to where this piece of metal is, but I couldn't quite get it in my 3D printer, but I was tired, thinking, I only got 8.3 inches by 8.3 inches square. Well, yes, that's length and width, but doing a diagonal, I can get a little bit longer. So I'm gonna go through and see if I can make this a little bit longer and hopefully have this piece reach right to where this metal is. Because even when I'm going through and running the ball around, I can tell it's going around and I can hear it just kind of hit this little piece right here and just kind of click, and so it's not really going quite as smooth as I want all the way around. Plus, the more and more I've looked at it, I don't know, my curve is exactly how I want it to be. I need to double check that curve. Looks like it's a little bit, anyway, a little bit ski-womp. It's not exactly perfect curve that I want. So anyway, so we will iterate on that just a little bit, but I mean, this works. Good first attempt, good first prototype. I think it's going to work just fine. We'll be able to screw it into the Playfield here. This will help guide the ball to be right in line with the flipper when it comes out. So hopefully you have as easy a shot as possible to be making this ramp and the drop targets. You can lock the ball behind. Boom, it won't get in the way of you going back to the starter lane. So yeah, I either just need a little bit longer piece of metal, which I'm at the max of my 48 inches right now. So final production, I won't have to worry about it. But for now, I'm going to see if I can print this to be just a little bit longer and make it fit on my 3D printer. Yeah, but yeah, I think it's going to work out pretty well. In fact, let's get some screws and let's play around with it a little bit more. Let's find some screws that work for this. There we go. Pretty good. So the ball is just barely nicking it right here. If you listen close, you can hear it click. Okay, so the thing I'm noticing is, so this is the piece, right? If you look at it from the side, you'll see this is all half-inch tall, but then it starts to angle down here, right? That's where the ball is going to come up, right? It needs to kind of come up this ramp slowly, right? And I have the groove here coming through, but then I continue the groove into the flat area here, right? Okay, so the ball can kind of come up and then hopefully kind of continue riding was my thought. But I think because of this curve here, okay, that the ball is riding on these rails, and then this right rail continues more than this rail does. So as the ball is coming up at the very last second, instead of continuing perfectly straight, it's giving it just a little bit of a last little kick. It's kind of coming off this direction a little bit. That's why when I pushed the ball a little bit slow, it came off and ended up like rolling into my scoop here. So what I think I need to do is have this groove only continue up until it reaches the top. So it's got equal amount of the ball right on the rail, and after that it's just like flat, and the ball can just hopefully continue on that same trajectory. Might still have a little bit of an issue here, you know, with this curve when it comes off, but most of the time with that plunge, the ball's gonna be going fast enough, it probably not be too much of an issue. But I do just don't like that the very last bit, it's curving just a little bit in. I want it to continue straight. Especially right now with these plastic brackets I have back here. Anything the ball comes a little more this direction, it's gonna hit the side of this bracket, which it did a couple times, and just kind of like, you know, fumble up. Once I have like final pieces of metal with rivets, that probably won't be as much of an issue. There won't be anything there to catch, right? Because the pieces of metal will just be themselves. We won't have these pieces of plastic sticking out. But for now and for the show, I don't want to be coming up and have people plunge just immediately. Their very first experience, they plunge the balls, it just kind of breaks in between these things. So I want this to be coming out as straight as possible. So I'm going to reprint this piece. I'm going to have the groove just come up and stop once it's flat. So it's just flat after that. I'm also going to see if I can extend this a little bit to get that last inch or so into where the metal is. Yeah, so I just had to bring it back and show you. So we finished printing off this piece now. See how much longer it is? And it was within about 2 millimeters, exactly where I want it to be. And I think I maybe fill that last gap. I still had a little bit of space. The metal, as I was going through, putting all the final wire forms in, everything set up, this piece of metal had kind of sagged forward a little bit, and it made the pathway here a little tight on the ball. So I had to make sure I pulled it back, get the right spot. So there's a little bit of a gap here. But that being said, see, now we've got the tracks stopping right here. Not sure how well you can see that. Let me bring it closer. All right, so we've got this ball track, the divots here, you know, this ball path coming up, and it stops evenly here on both sides, so the ball won't get pushed one way or the other. I'm hoping this screw is not in the way. I might need to maybe move it back here a little bit. So that's one thing I might iterate on. We're going to test it though, but I want to see how this goes around. I got a new nice smooth curve here that I think is going to be lined up perfectly. Let's roll the ball and see how it goes. Can you even see it over there? Let me get you set up to where you can see. There, it's a little more kind of playfield level, but it's relatively flat. So here we go. Smooth like butter. I love that. Oh, right down here to your left flipper. Oh, I'm liking that. Oh yeah. How's that looking? It looks, for me here, it looks amazing. Coming out so smooth. And now the ball. There we go. Can you see what I'm doing here? Going great. Not even hit my piece of plastic over here. Good. Okay, super soft, and it did go that way. So if you don't do your short plunge just right, that's gonna be tricky, doing the short plunge into the scoop or short plunge to your flipper. Yeah, how do you do a short plunge just enough to get up there? And then you bring it down and you make a shot. Makes that short plunge even trickier, but skill shot, have to be worth more points. But seriously though, look at this. All the way around, like butter. Mostly. Yes. Ding. Making a shot. Yes. All right, so now we're gonna call that the end of this video. Super pleased with how it's turning out. While it was printing off, I went ahead and got the new upper playfield in. It's nice and smooth. It's got everything in place. I think I learned the trick about wiring this little guy. Trying to go through and wire all the connections after all the pieces were mounted on this playfield is really tight. So I think the thing I need to remember from going forward when I am reassembling this and doing the wiring, that I want to kind of wire up all the mechs and then be screwing them down. It'll probably make that a lot easier, especially if we're trying to get in there and like solder the joints and everything. But yeah, we've got everything in place now. 100% all done. I've still got a little bit of wiring I'm still cleaning up. I fixed the one wiring issue back here. Everything has power. I've got these stand-ups I need to wire. I got the inlane switches I need to put in. This stand-up here needs to get wired, so I need to wire these stand-ups, inlanes, and yeah, we've got a little bit of wiring on the inside of the cabinet that I need to go through and change up to match for these new connectors I'm using. So we'll need to change that out. I had like a 9-pin, a smaller 9-pin. Now we got these two separate 9-pins because we have, I think, like 15, 16 wires now. I'm going back and forth between the cabinet and the playfield. But other than that, we're going to be done with all the electromechanical stuff. So the next thing though is going to be to go through and make it to where we can put this in the cabinet, and when we hit that start button, that the MPF software starts up, starts the game, kicks the ball out of the trough, we're player one, and we're able to start playing and play testing. So that'll be the next video, right? All right, thanks for watching, everybody. We're getting so close, almost done with the electromechanical. It's going to be tight, getting everything ready for the show, but it's May, what is it, May 19th, May 20th, somewhere around there. We only got a couple weeks, so it's getting close, but hopefully we'll have something playable. All right, thanks for watching, everybody. Catch you next time. Bye-bye.